Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lallo.
And we've got a good guest for you this week, Caroline Peckham. Got it right, Caroline? And she's a newer author, so that should be exciting for those of you who are maybe got a couple books out and hoping to score big, or at least get off to a good start with the next one. She lives in the southeast of London in a tiny quintessentially, didn't I just say that I tried to take out the hard to pronounce words in the bio? I totally lied. It's an English town where you'll find an abundance of tea shops, pubs, and rain. She has a BSc in zoology from the University of, is it Reading or Reading?
Reading.
Reading.
Just to be
I
confusing.
thought that was appropriate for a writer to have gone to
Yeah.
reading. And when not writing, she has a mind for science and Googles every question that springs to her mind. She got started publishing in December 2015 with a YA fantasy series, The Rise of Isaac, and things took off for her this last fall with her new YA vampire series, V Games. Caroline, welcome to the show. Do you want to say anything that I mangled or left out there?
No, I think you did well. Except I did move from the little town, so now I'm near London. Not quite so tea shoppy.
Not quintessential.
No,
quintessentially
exactly.
London.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. There's probably more action there.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and publishing?
Yeah, so my story was a little bit like you said. I went to Reading and I did zoology, which was completely different to writing, but it was something I always wanted to do, but I guess I never thought I could do it as a job, so I always did it on the side while I was studying, and when I left uni I kind of more realized that was what I wanted to do, and I started writing my first, actually finished something. I had wrote a lot of things, never finished anything, and eventually was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the whole traditional published thing, like send it off to agents. But I think 2013 I had a manuscript after 2 years of writing it, sent it off, got horrendously rejected as you do, and that's when I found out about Amazon self-publishing. I just looked into it and started finding just sort of opened up a whole world to me that I didn't know about, and just found so many people that were doing it full time, and I got really excited about it, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I was still working full time obviously at the time, so I published with Amazon exclusively in December 2015. It was no sort of hit out the park or anything, very steady, I didn't get any massive sales or anything. It was kind of 1 or 2 sales initially, and then all your friends and everything buy it, and then things hit home and you realize you really have to sort of look into all the marketing. So that's when I really started looking into everything about how this was working. Was when I found your podcast and started really learning about how to look at this as a business, and over the space of 2 years I got out 4 books in that series. I started making more money, but it wasn't, it was only sort of £200-300 a month, nothing that would, quit my day job kind of thing. And yeah, it wasn't until this new series that I saw this massive change. And I've gone full time now, so that's kind of kind of where I've got to now.
Awesome. I mean, it's actually, I think, more helpful for people to hear from somebody who didn't hit it out of the park with their first one, because that's way more typical. Most people, you put it out there and then you try to get your friends and family to buy it, and then
exactly. And you hear about I've read about so many people that did get it straight off the mark, and I was like, how have they done it? Really studied into how everyone trying to find the secret for so long, and realized there isn't really one. And it's just a lot of hard work really what it comes down to. And I think really what made this series a success was the planning and thinking so much more about the marketing before I even wrote it. That's what's made the difference this time, definitely.
And you did YA with both of your series, right? Is that
Mhm.
just what you love to read and kind of always what you figured you would go into?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I love reading it. They are very different though. I think that there isn't much crossover with the two series, and I went for something a bit more edgy and something I took a lot more risks with, because I think initially, because I wrote to traditional publishing initially, I was very cautious of like making sure it's YA and like the sense of traditional publishing. Whereas now, because I know the market a lot better and I know what's out there and what people read more, that I just was like, I'm just going to write it how I want it to be. And it's got a YA sort of tag on it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my readers are 20 plus, really, I find.
Well, we've kind of talked about that on here before, that YA is actually pretty hard if you're just self-publishing, and we mostly do the ebooks. And then you've got an audience that's like, doesn't have credit cards. And
Hmm.
kind of, we keep hearing that the teenagers seem to prefer the paperbacks right now.
Yeah.
You found challenges in the department?
Yeah, I think what I found was that YA appealed to such a broader audience than I first realized. And I think when I initially started, I was really like modeling off of published authors, like these big, Twilight and these massive genres that they do well because, that everyone is buying the paperbacks and that kind of thing. But I think nowadays that YA does appeal to just such a broad, even with Twilight, like there's just such a broad audience with that, that's where I really put my focus. Yeah, so I find like a lot of like stay-at-home mums is a lot of my audience. I found, so I target a lot in that sense because I know that now. But yeah, before I was like really targeting at teenagers, and that is really difficult because I don't know if they do read in the same way, or like you say, they don't have the money to buy Kindle books.
So if you're, because I've actually heard that from a lot of YA authors, that they hear from a lot of adult readers,
Hmm.
maybe not only adult readers, but definitely as a big portion of their audience. So do you have to think about, I have to write something that's maybe got the younger characters, but that's also going to appeal to an
Hmm.
older reader?
Yeah, I'd say almost what I did with this one was I wrote with the younger characters, but I would say it's almost an adult story. And I decided to keep the YA tag on it because my kind of feeling was that teenagers are kind of watching these, even with like TV series, they're watching things like Game of Thrones and those kinds of shows and reading those kinds of books. And I don't know if that really affects, I don't think it matters, and I don't think it would put them off reading either way if it's like got more adult themes in it. But I do draw lines. It's not like too graphic or anything, but yeah, I've just decided to be like, if I would need it to go a certain way, I'm happy to do that now. Whereas before I'd always be like, oh, I don't want to like cross any lines or like, you know, upset parents.
That actually flows into what I wanted to ask about is YA. It seems to be a category that's mostly defined by a book that doesn't contain certain things. Like frequently, the name of a book genre tells you what's in it. YA is more of a label that tells you what's not in it.
Hmm.
So, do you feel like it's a valuable label, or do you think that audiences can be trusted to draw their own conclusions with or without YA and make that decision for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays it doesn't really need that YA tag. I think you're almost saying, it's not, like you say, it's not some things, just by putting that on there. But yeah, I mean, YA isn't technically a genre, it's an age category. But then I found that that age isn't what I'm selling to really anyway. So I don't know if it's relevant or not, to be honest, if it was on there, if it would make a difference.
Now, again, if you were to, if you explicitly state something as YA and it contains something that wouldn't normally be in a young adult book, you're probably going to get complaints.
Mhm.
Whereas you're probably not going to get too many, I should say, form as a question, are you less likely to get complaints for a book that isn't labeled YA but does not cross the lines that YA doesn't cross?
I mean, I've not had any complaints. I certainly don't. contain, you know, like I say, I don't have any graphic scenes in it. Those are kind of my lines. I wouldn't cross those lines, but there's plenty of books that wouldn't have that anyway. So I don't know really if that would affect it, but I guess you're kind of, by putting that there, you're saying it is a certain, it's going to be at a certain level. But I've definitely pushed the boundaries of that, I think, this time, just because I think from what I feel people are reading and watching anyway, I don't think that teenagers would be not reading this stuff. So yeah.
All right. So since I've actually released a couple titles that also a lot of people have considered YA, I'm curious, are there any keywords you use in your Amazon categories that you feel properly target the YA audience?
I tried really, really hard when I first started to really target YA. And one of the problems I have is because it's a vampire book, my new series, I'm kind of competing with a very big market. So I had to think a little bit outside the box when I went with keywords this time, especially because there's a couple of authors that really, really dominate those top categories. So I knew from the get-go I wasn't going to rank in, you know, fantasy vampires. Like, that's just flooded. So I decided to go with thriller, suspense, but I went on like a supernatural suspense, which actually are quite smaller categories. If people should probably check them out, because there aren't as many in those, and they're not dominated by these huge sellers. So it's easier to show up in them.
So are those the words you actually specify there, like, you know, inside your keywords, like, you know, thriller, mystery?
Yeah, I've got supernatural, suspense, mystery. Yeah, I went for supernatural as my keyword, and I do use a couple of them. I've got werewolves and vampires as 2 keywords. I tried out British because there is smaller categories in Britain that kind of come down, but I didn't find that made any difference. I didn't get to rank in those. So yeah, what I've tried to go down the supernatural road rather than specifically onto vampires.
That's a good point for people who are looking like in the fantasy section, and it takes like a really good ranking maybe to hit contemporary urban fantasy or vampires specifically, that you can find appropriate categories under other, like you were saying. And I think like women's fiction and men's fiction too may even have a fantasy under their super genre or whatever you want to call the top level.
I think I went for women's fiction, actually. I think that might be one of mine at the moment. Yeah, so you can rank a little bit better because there are some smaller categories in there. But I did do a lot of research I basically spent a couple of days on Amazon looking through those categories and really trying to find the smaller ones, which I did by looking at books that weren't doing like hugely well but were ranking quite well. One of the things I found out, I can't remember who it was, but someone a long time ago recommended, if you look at a category and then you click on the first one, if it's ranking above 1,000, that's good, and then you look at the bottom one at 20, and if it ranks above 20,000, that's a good category to sort of look at, because then that means there's quite a lot of that's like a smaller category. So if those top 2019 and 20 are ranking at top 1,000, like, you're not gonna jump in there very quickly.
Yeah, and it's worth kind of keeping an eye on things too, even if your series has been out for a while, because I just noticed Amazon added some more under the fantasy category. They just added like an action and adventure, and I emailed and said, can you put my new book in this? And, you know, they've added dragons and mythological creatures, which may not apply to vampires, but, you know, there are occasionally they add some more. And if you're the first one in, it's an opportunity, because a lot of times you have to do like a keyword to get in, or you have to email them and ask rather than just selecting it from the dashboard.
No, I've not tried emailing them. I might have to try that.
Well, yeah, if you see one and you can't figure out how to get into it, that's when you're like, okay.
Yeah.
We email and ask through it's just through Author Central, and they usually just go, okay, we added you.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'll check that out.
All right, so I have to ask about vampires, because I'm sure we must have had some author on this vampire expert over the years that we've been doing the show, but it's one of those things, beings, undead creatures that wax and wane in popularity. You know, it seems to kind of go in cycles. So here we are in early 2018. How do you feel that vampires are doing right now? Is it like a good time to jump into writing about them?
Yeah, I think almost it's not gone away. I put off writing the series for quite a while because I was like, oh, vampires have been done. It's such a big competitive genre, and I looked into it, and there's just so many out there, and so many vampire writers that are doing so well that you might not have heard of, but clearly like their series are doing really well. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go for it. And I knew it was I knew it was going to be a big task jumping into such a massive category. Um, and yeah, when I felt that, yeah, the market's definitely still there for vampires, I decided I wanted to kind of do something new, which obviously is quite hard, something that's been done 1,000 times. I was like, I'm going to really try and bring a new angle into this. And yeah, so that's why I did the vampire games idea. I sort of tried to combine a vampire Hunger Games element and went for a little niche there that, as far as I can see, hadn't been done, which has turned out, yeah, it's gone really well. It's gone down well.
That sounds like a good idea to me, to like kind of take and combine two elements that are popular, especially if you're still hitting kind of the tropes that people are looking for when they're looking for vampire fantasy stories.
Yeah, because I did do a lot of research into that crossover, because I thought, are Hunger Games fans, do they read the set? Do they read that? And there was obviously the Hunger Games Twilight was a massive crossover, but I didn't know, and I thought, well, there's something here that's not really been done and has this sort of crossover market that maybe could do quite well. And yeah, because I love those books anyway, it was kind of a really natural idea. It was something I would want to read. That was like my initial thing. I was like, this is really cool, like no one's done this. So yeah, it was an exciting idea, and I thought, even though it's going into a big market, if it stands out, I felt I could do well with it.
Yeah, sometimes if you see tons of books in the the area you're excited about writing about, that just means there's a really big readership, and that some of those voracious folks reading a book a day may be out of vampire novels from their favorite authors and looking for something new.
Absolutely. I mean, my readers, I'll drop an arc out, and they've literally, the next day it's like, when's the next one out? And I'm like, oh my gosh, give me time.
Yeah, I found too that a lot of times if agents are saying like, we don't want any more of these, there's way too many of them out there, that's probably a good sign that there's like a really hungry readership. Like
Yeah,
they always
yeah.
said that with some of the D&D kind of fantasy. And when I first got started, I saw like, I think it was David Dalglish just killing it with these orc books. I'm like, I'm not sure those agents are right. I think this is really popular and people want these.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think they probably won't get published maybe at the moment because it's been done in a sense, but the readership is there, and they're, like you say, they're hungry and they read so much that I don't think there's a limit of how many readers are out there for these books, because they're just chewing them up. And anything new, if you do it right and you get it there in front of them, they're going to read it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And as Lindsay said, vampires, like they come into and out of favor. They always seem to be not far from the public consciousness, and there's a lot of tropes that are associated with vampires. What about them do you think makes them such an appealing subject for books like this?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's one of those things that's been around for so long, and even going back to Dracula is one of those ideas that's just captured people, and it's something I love. And I think there are so many things you can kind of do with it that I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, there's this romance element to it, I think, that is important. People love this kind of, the Edward Cullen idea was what made Twilight so popular. But I think beyond that, there's this sort of romance around the whole vampire idea that people just love, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, and I guess one of the other things that's handy about it is a thing that everyone immediately understands. From a very, very young age, you know exactly what a vampire is and exactly what their deal is. So you sort of you can lean on that and spend a lot more of your storytelling time telling your story as opposed to establishing
Yeah, it's
what's
already in
otherwise
place.
sort of complex.
Yeah, exactly. It's already there, and you've got people that off the bat know exactly what to expect. But what I did try to shake it up a little bit, because I think there, is done, and if it is just, you know, Twilight again, then people are going to roll their eyes, kind of thing. So I did try to give it this new fresh element, that makes it, even it's still something that people can read and say, oh, it's like, you know, it's vampires that people know. It's not changed so much that it's unrecognizable.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you read many YA titles?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's what really got me into writing this genre. I've always loved it. I grew up on, you know, I was of the age when Twilight came out. I was 17, and it was my kind of age, and I grew up in Harry Potter, and those are things that have just had a massive influence on my life, and I love reading it. And even now I make sure that I read a lot of indie authors that are writing in this genre, because just to know what other people are doing, really, and like you get inspiration just from writing and being like, oh, like they've taken it this way or that way. And I think it's quite important to read in your genre, just so you know what's kind of going on in that, what's going on at the kind of time it's out.
So in case any of our subscribers are ready to release their first YA novel, have you noticed any underlying problems with any of them that you feel could be actively avoided? Any like mistakes with covers, blurbs, plot points, anything like that?
Nothing like that's cropped up in terms of like people mentioning problems. I'd say the biggest thing that's kind of helped me get it out there would be planning it, and planning your release, and giving, I mean, the biggest thing for me has been reviews and organizing a review team before I even got it released. And I had a review team ready 2 months before I even had an arc ready, like waiting, and I gave them chapters, like unedited chapters, to be like, it's coming, like just get ready for it. And I think it's all about the launch, for me, has been the biggest thing. I mean, I don't know if there's anything I would say to avoid doing in terms of writing, or plot points that I've ever had kind of complaints about. But really thinking about your launch is important.
Have you found, we're kind of moving into the marketing questions now, although we've kind of touched on some of this already, but what are some of the challenges that you've found trying to write books for this kind of, like I said before, a pre-credit card audience that they don't have their own Amazon account? And it sounds like some of it is you're selling to older individuals, but what are some of the challenges you've come across?
In terms of the audience?
Just in terms of selling the books, basically, to to finding your readers, you know, and I don't know if do you have teenage readers, or is it almost all adults, do you think?
I mean, I do think it is almost all adults. Certainly the ones that reach out to me are. I mean, I can't see obviously who reads it through Amazon. Like, that would be amazing. But the people that actually come to me through, I've got like a Facebook fan group. I would say 99% of them are adults. I mean, I don't mind, in a sense. It doesn't matter who's reading it as long as people are reading it. And I have, because of that, because I know who's reading it, I have focused a lot of my efforts on those people. So I spent a lot of time contacting. So initially, when I came out with the review group idea, I spent a lot of time contacting people who had reviewed books in the same genre. And that's kind of how I formed my art group originally. And then now on my fan group, it's that kind of genre. And I've played around with Facebook advertising, and you can do a lot of that. They've got this crossover thing now, so you can say like people who like this, say like who like the Hunger Games, I can cross with vampires. But then I will also add in now an age group, or I'll put, you can have stay-at-home mums, or that kind of thing on Facebook. So you can really get very specific about who you're targeting. And so that's how I've I mean, I guess in a sense I'm not targeting teenagers now, because where I have tried that in the past, I feel it has failed a little bit. So I know who's buying them now. It's easier to target your advertising.
Yeah, that's probably a good tip for other authors who are either doing YA and are just struggling to, you know, how do I get to this teenage audience when I'm not a teenager myself
Yeah.
anymore, maybe not hanging out online with them.
Yeah, I should mention that quite a few people that have read it have said they've given it to their daughter or their like son to read. So teenagers are getting it through their parents almost. I've had quite a few people say that. So maybe that's one way you can reach them, but obviously you can't control that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you get big enough too, and people just start seeing the book everywhere on Goodreads and on the Amazon list, then you will eventually reach that audience. They will find you through word of mouth or, like you said, their parents. So
yeah, they're almost not the place to start. They're the place to reach eventually.
Well, so then did you try Wattpad or any of the kind of the free sites out there that are known to kind of have a YA young audience?
I tried Wattpad a long time ago with my first series, but I did get a couple of reviewers from it when I did release on Amazon, but ultimately I didn't find it particularly effective for me. I think there's so much out there, and it's people that are spending a lot of time. It's almost like a social media, and I don't have the time to kind of spend posting chapters like that. I think it could be, though. I mean, I know there's a big audience there, but like you say, I think it's a lot of people, a lot of teenagers looking for free writing, and they're writing themselves. So I haven't found any success with it.
Yeah, it seems like some people every now and then somebody really does well and catches on there, but you probably do have to network almost, go post on other people's stories and hope they come back and comment on yours.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned that you kind of hit up reviewers that were doing books in your genre. Were you just surfing through Amazon to find those people, or are you talking about like review blogs?
So I did it through Amazon and Goodreads, but I did do a heavy focus on Goodreads. So I started initially by setting up a Goodreads group called the V Games Advanced Readers Group. And I basically I just went through books in a similar genre, chose people that had given 5 stars to those genres and written a proper review. And I messaged them just saying, I've got an advanced copy coming out soon, get sent the blurb of the book, a little synopsis, and said, if you're interested, come and join my advanced reader group. And through that, I got over 120 people join. And when it came out, that was like, I think about 80 to 90 of them reviewed it. Over time, I had sort of 50 came out pretty quick, and then over time I got up to 80, 90 from that group. And then I moved that group quite swiftly to Facebook, because I'm much more comfortable with Facebook. I find Goodreads a little bit clunky to use personally. And with Facebook, I find you can post, like adverts and snippets, and I use an app called Wordle to like animate images basically, and then put a little snippet from my book, which I find really good. They're quite like catchy. And I just basically have my advanced readers group on Facebook. I invited everyone from Goodreads to come and join it. And I basically just kept encouraging them to do it until I got most of them to do it and said that I wouldn't really be using the Goodreads one. I still post in there for advanced reader copies, but generally now everyone's on Facebook, and that group kind of grows because Facebook almost advertise to similar groups, which you might have found they'll put a little recommendation to another advanced group that's in a similar genre. So I found I'll pick up every day, I'll get more people joining that group through either they've read the book and they want an advanced reader copy of the new one, or they'll just find it through a recommendation. And I do find that very effective because there is obviously an element of people just getting that copy and not reviewing, but I think that's just with the case with any advanced reader group. You'll get an element of that, but I think probably 60% to 70% review it now, which is really good.
It's interesting. I know a lot of people, when they put together an advanced reader group and they use a Facebook group to manage it, they make it a private group. And having it not private and having recommendation engine send new people to it is an interesting idea.
Yeah, I've tried to be really open. I'm so happy for anyone to contact me and say, I want the book. Like most people don't, but especially with the second book, if someone's they had an advanced reader copy or they couldn't find the second book, I'll always give them a free copy, because I just think you're kind of cultivating your fans, and I really, really value every single fan I have. And I know if someone loves it and I give them the book, they really appreciate that and they will review it for me. So I just, I'm always really, really open about that. And with the advanced group, I'm happy for it to grow, because I just think, most people, unless you're really, really interested in advanced groups and you know all about that, you're not going to be looking to do that. You'll just wait for the release to come out. So I think if you've got an element of people just coming for the free book, then I don't think you're going to get as much of that as you'd think, maybe.
Now, because you write young adult, obviously your audience, even if it's mostly adults, your audience is still probably going to skew younger than a lot of other genres and types of book. And typically speaking, the younger the audience, the more socially connected they are on social media and stuff. Do you think that helps with word of mouth?
I think so. I think there are so many groups now. I mean, I do really focus on Facebook. I don't use, like, I've tried Twitter and Instagram and things like that, which I personally, I'm just not that, I don't know it as well. So I find Facebook for me is something I know, and I know how to sort of navigate it. And I found there's so many readers groups on Facebook, and I get people now, whereas I would have been sort of joining groups and being like, please can I like post something and ask if people want to review it. Now I get people asking me, or they'll invite me to groups and say, oh, this is a review group. Like, I've even had one recently where I got invited by a fan that ran one, and I've had about 6 reviews from that's gone up in there. And I really do focus on getting reviews, because I think once they're on Amazon, that starts really getting your promotion out there with Amazon. So it's hard to say. With Amazon, you don't know.
What do you do to sort of encourage reviews? Obviously, you have the review group, but let's say encourage conversation to make sure that people stay interested in the stuff.
So I have a specific fan group on Facebook, which is separate to my advanced group. That is something I promote in the back of all my books and in my newsletter. And that's basically something I post in probably every couple of days. And I'll put, like I say, I use this Wordle app. I'm often doing that. So it's like little animated images of something that looks like it's from the book. And then I'll post something from just a little snippet from the book I'm writing at the moment. And I get so much response from that, which is amazing. And it just keeps it on people's minds. So I know that when this advanced copy is ready, they're all ready and waiting for it, because it's been there, and I'm always kind of in touch with them. They're not forgetting about it.
All right. So obviously you use Facebook, you like it a lot there. Do you feel that pretty much all authors should have a presence on some sort of social networking platform?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it is important it has to be something that resonates with you, something you use a lot. If you use Goodreads all the time, I'd say go there. I know there's a massive audience there, but for me, it's not something I feel really like. I'm not sort of in the know with Goodreads, or like Twitter. I've tried things, and it's just not something I know about or that works. But yeah, I would say that it's really important to be in some way out there and connected with fans, because I think they just love that, and having that personal connection. A lot of people are choosing independent authors because of that reason. I've had people say that to me, that they're like, it's amazing that you like talk to your fans so often and you're so connected, and it's all about being an independent author to them. That's really important. So I think if whatever way you're doing it, even if it's through like a newsletter or something, it's really good to just be there, like talking to them.
All right. So I got to make sure I understand correctly. You think there is a certain platform, Twitter, that's not worth your time in order to try and figure out, right? That's awesome. Are there any other platforms that you feel are overrated?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, Twitter for me is like a no-go. Honestly, I would talk about Facebook ads, because I've had a bit of a massive, so much money went down the drain almost with Facebook ads. I love Facebook, like I've said, but for me, the advertising I thought was working. I was bringing in, the reads were really high. I had a really like specifically targeted adverts that were like about to get the reads. I was saying it's free and Kindle Unlimited. My reads were high, and then 2 months later, I was like, I think I'm gonna up the money. So I doubled it for like a week just to see, and it made no difference. And I thought, I'll cut it off completely then and see if that makes a difference. And the read stayed the same. And I realized for 2 months that I'd basically been paying for reads that were going to come in anyway. So personally with Facebook ads, I've had a bit of a big fail there, but I think some people obviously do well at it. But yeah, I've gone off them now.
Yeah, I had kind of the same experience with Facebook ads with my last launch. You know, I was excited because I got it down to like 11 cents a click or something. And I was getting a lot of clicks, but I was using the affiliate links, which you're not supposed to do, and but I still do. And so I can see, like, I'd only get like 4 book sales from 100 some clicks. And then, you know, you can't tell with KU, are any of those people just borrowing them and it's not showing up. But I had kind of a similar experience to you, and I just turned them off. Like the sales ranking didn't change at all.
Yeah.
I feel like with Facebook, you probably have to do something like send them to a landing page on your site where they can download the free ebook so that you can really tell like where all the traffic is coming from Facebook and how much of it is converting. I mean, we've definitely had people that have done like box sets on Amazon and have done well with Facebook. I'm just, you know, it's something I throw in there during the launch week, but I've generally also found that, at least for me and my specific books and genre, that it's been kind of not that effective generally. Well, you already talked a little bit about what you did with this series compared with your first one, but are there kind of any other things that you maybe learned with that first series that you've applied or didn't do again that maybe other people could also learn to have a more successful launch?
I would say there's one thing. I had my first book free for a long time as a perma free in my first series, and I found that tapered off a lot, and I decided to take it out and put it back in KU at like a 99p price, and then the reads kind of picked up and things did. I found that even doing because I do focus my efforts on kind of newsletter ads now, because I find that big push gets you up in the charts and then the reads kind of follow. So I find even if you're a 99p point, that works for me. So that's why I launched the first book of my new series at 99p, and I did that as a whole. It was going to be 99p for a week, which I ended up extending because it was just selling so much better. And I think once it gets that ranking, it does stick around. And so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't put off perma-free, but I don't think it's as effective as it used to be. And I know that you've definitely tried that in the past. That's why I chose to do it originally, because of what you said on the podcast. And it definitely initially was such a big push on the series. But yeah, I don't know now. I think things change so fast that it's like things are different, and you can even market at $1.99 now on newsletter and do well. So I'm not sure. That would probably be something I would maybe avoid now.
Yeah, I know Jeff, I think, has been talking about cycling it, you know, maybe doing perma-free book one for a couple months and then a book one in a different series. And I've still got some perma-frees out there, but mostly because they're like book one in an 8-book series. So there's so many more for them to go on and buy if they do like the first one. But yeah, you have to advertise it now and then, or either that or you have something else that's selling well enough that people are checking out your backlist. But otherwise, it can just drop off to, you know, I mean, maybe 5, 10 downloads a day, and at that point you're not going to get a whole bunch of people buying through to the rest of the series.
Yeah.
Do you think switching genres had anything to do with your success? Like, was your first one more YA? It looked like kind of a secondary world fantasy.
Yeah, it's not epic fantasy, but it's that it's not. Yeah, obviously this is very paranormal. I think it definitely has affected the sales, just because I think this is just a bigger genre almost that I'm targeted. So the readers are kind of there and they're voracious, and I got it in front of them. So that was my real goal, was to get it in front of them. I was like 3 months before I even brought it out, was like, I'm going to get these people that reading it before it's even out. And that was the whole review group idea. And then really from there, one thing probably that was really good was one of the advanced readers messaged me and said, oh, you should just send a polite little message to everyone that's had an advanced copy and ask them to buy it on release day or buy the pre-order. I did like a 2-week, maybe it's 3-week pre-order on it, because obviously with the first book of a new series I didn't expect to get many pre-orders, but because it was ready I just had it out there, and I ended up doing that, and through them and I think probably them talking to people that they knew that read the genre, I had about 80 pre-orders just through that. And I think that was such an important part of that, because obviously on the first day it came out, it jumped up in the charts, and for a new series that was really key to getting it out there very quickly.
I'd like to talk about your covers. The covers and titles and everything are very quickly identifiable as a theme. How did you come up with your cover format?
So I do my own covers. I use Shutterstock, and then I obviously put the text on. I basically really did look at the genre and what's, and what you look at and is paranormal. I wanted something really striking, and I want the series to look like a series. So I did initially pick out those pictures, what it was going to be. Even book 2, I knew what it was going to be, and obviously that was one of the other things, but going back to what Lindsay asked me before about covers, the first time when I first brought out my first series was, I thought maybe it would be a good idea to go something like that looks really different, which I didn't realise it's actually better to look part of the genre, so people can instantly recognise that as that genre. And so now I've gone down that route, obviously. I do. I chose the names, B Games. So it does sound like the Hunger Games, but then it has this vampire element right there in your face. Then I called the series the Vampire Games. So it was all marketing based, those ideas. Like, I'm not going to lie, they were all, I always thought about marketing when I came up with all of that.
It's funny how often you genuinely believe that the best thing you can do is stand out, and then you quickly discover you do want to stand out in terms of quality, but in terms of on the shelf, you want to look like the product you are.
Yeah, it took me a long time to realize that.
And also, I'm impressed that you did your own covers. One of the things that we very frequently, especially in emails, very frequently will say, if you're going to spend the money on an edit and on a cover, because those are the two things that you might think you can do, but you frequently can't. So I'm impressed at the level of quality you're able to achieve.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a little bit out of the box in that sense, because I edit between me and my sister edit, and I do the covers. And we've done that for years, and it works for me. But I know, even from watching your podcast for years, I've been like, oh my god, I should pay for covers and editing. And I have a friend that's an editor, and I worked very hard to work on my own editing skills. And my sister's very good at it, so between the two of us, and then I get some of my advanced readers pick out the Englishisms that I do. That I try. There's a few things that I have to really be careful of, because I'm aware of them now, but there are some things that English people say that you don't even know at all, that I will put in there, and when an advanced copy goes out, I'll get what does that even mean, what is that? So
I'm going to remember that word.
Handy.
Englishism. I like that.
An Englishism, yeah.
But I tried once to make my own covers, and it did not work. So I will leave that to someone who knows what the heck they're doing there. But I'm curious I was kind of looking at some of your pricing there. When it comes to pricing, do you follow any sort of guidelines? Like, for example, titles with 50,000 words will be $2.99, 75, $3.99. I noticed you had one that was $3.50. So I was kind of curious what structure you follow.
So most of my books are, I think they're all around the 100,000 mark. So I've always gone. Initially, I did the Amazon recommended $2.99, which it didn't really I don't know if that did much for me. And I decided on 350 was like a fair point. Just looking, I looked at other people in my genre and what they're doing, and I decided on the 99p for the first book because I think most of the vampire series out there always start with that 99p starter book. So it's just really pricing it where everyone else is. And I did try. I think underpricing is actually worse than going up a little bit, because going up a little bit just shows some quality, and the reviews prove that. So you're not gonna, no one's gonna feel like, you know, they've spent $3.50 and they're gonna feel like you scammed them, kind of thing. That's not that much money, and I think it's not too much money either. I think it's a reasonable kind of area to be at.
It's a good point to look at what others in your genre are selling at, because it is very different if you look at the top 100s in the different subcategories.
Yeah, definitely. So I try to stay in the same areas where my genre is at, and then yeah, you can go up a little bit maybe with later books in the series, but I tend to try and be fair and say, I'll just say 99p first book, 350 for the rest for each one.
Yeah, I think the 99 cent or pence works really well in KU right now, just because I mentioned my numbers on the last show we did, and it's like I didn't make that much in sales, but here you got like 1 million, 2 million reads or something, and it ends up being like, you know, 6 times as much from that.
Yeah, it's really good. I found I had it at, I had the first one on sale of V Games for 99p for a while, and then when the second one came out in December, I jumped it up to 350, and it stuck around for a while. I was pleasantly surprised with that. I was like, it was a bit of just a gamble just to see if it would stick around. But towards the end of January, I found it was just dropping a little bit, and I was like, oh, I'll just this was back in the Facebook ads days, so I was still not sure what was making this change. But I, now looking back, when I dropped it to 99p again for a little boost, that's what made the reads jump up again, definitely. So it wasn't the Facebook ads.
Yeah, and I should clarify, I'm mostly a fan of doing it on book one, like you were talking about, and then the rest of them maybe whatever you consider full price or a fair price in your genre. I feel at that point they're either going to go with you and read the rest of the series, or they just didn't care that much if they were not willing to go up to $3. And with KU, of course, it doesn't matter. They're just going to borrow it. Yeah. Although every now and then you get an awesome reader who's like, I read your books in KU and then I bought them because I wanted to keep them.
I know, I love those people.
And you're like, that's the most possible money I could possibly make from that book. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I did take a peek at your books in the UK store. I was curious, you know, I would think you'd get a boost being over there, but it seems like you probably sell a little better in the US store. Do you have any thoughts on, like, are vampires bigger over here, or is there just more marketing opportunities for kind of the Amazon.com store?
Yeah, I to be honest, since day one, even with my first series, I've always sold better in the US. I think the market out there is just so much bigger. So like you were saying, I think in the last podcast, that proportionally maybe you're selling quite well in the UK. So I haven't really worked that out. But yeah, I definitely, like, I would say like at least 60% of my readers are US, at least, probably more. So that's why I have to be really careful with the grammar stuff, because there are many things that can be picked up on as wrong.
It is funny. I feel like with different genres too, it might make a difference. Like maybe dragons and epic fantasy, I know they're big in Germany. I don't know if maybe they're bigger proportionally in the UK too, but like vampires and paranormal maybe are big over here. Or
yeah, I don't know, because then like with epic fantasy, it's always English actors if it's in a film, isn't it? Like they.
Well, we like to make our dragons, you know, like Sean Connery, do our dragon voices.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe there's that.
Yeah, and in my case too, I've just been around now for like 7 years and have had permafreeze and downloads from all over, so I could just have a larger fan base just because I've been publishing that stuff longer. Yeah. And I feel like in the first couple of years too, like we've talked about how the permafreeze were very effective, and you did get a lot of people trying your series. So I don't know, it's actually you're probably a better sample type as a newer author of kind of like what's working now and what's effective right now.
Yeah, I guess like there is that element of the market's just so much bigger in America, so you're always going to make more money there, and if you're cracking into both markets in that sense. But like you can get into these niches, and I think like you probably, once you've got the momentum going in the UK, you're going to do really well because it's just a smaller market and you rank better. Like I find I rank, especially with my first series, always ranked better in the UK. Just even if I was selling better in America, I would rank higher in the UK just because the charts were smaller.
Now, do you, like, for example, because you can rank higher with fewer sales, do you ever do any targeted advertising to the other regions like the UK or anything like that, or do you generally just take advertising sort of holistically?
I always try to include the UK because I have this feeling of like, from the UK, I need to like market here. But anything I do, I find really the impact always comes from the US. Ultimately, like that's where the money comes from. So yeah, maybe one day.
Okay, so now that you've been doing this for a little bit, you've got some titles under your belt. I always like asking the question: is if you were given the chance, would you do anything differently?
I think really, my first series was that trial and error, and I've really narrowed down and honed what works, and that's why this is done well. And so I wouldn't say no, I wouldn't do my launch differently because it worked. And the only thing now that I feel is to get the more books out. There's always this pressure to be like, keep bringing those books out. And I know because I got the first book out, the second book out, sorry, within a month of the first one coming out, and now it's been almost 3 months since the second book came out. And I would like to get it out quicker, but ultimately, I think quality is so much more important than quantity and bringing it out that fast. So there's nothing I would say on this series that I would change. Only that, yeah, I'd like to just keep building on this now. Like it's never, I don't think you can ever say, oh, like, right, made my money, I'm done, like it's just going to keep selling. I don't think anyone could say that in this market, like in this job. It's just a constantly building on what you've started and what you've done.
So if someone came up to you and said they're getting ready to release their very first novel and it's all going to be about vampires, what would you tell
them? I'd say take your time in getting it ready to go out. I'd say contact as many people as you possibly can to get interest going before it's ready. And one thing that I actually would like to do probably from now is contacting possibly people in a similar situation to me in the same genre and trying to get some cross promotion going on. That's something that if someone reached out to me now that had a vampire novel, I'd happily kind of throw it on my newsletter or that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say like take risks, and there's so many opportunities out there, and people are really like responsive, and like fans and authors, like this is all kind of like the more you help each other, it's not like you're not really competing in that sense. I don't think you're just there like everyone's doing different things and talking to a lot of other authors, and even fans can come up with great ideas that can help. So yeah, I would say like just get out there and just get talking to people really.
You know that now that you said that you'd be open to promoting other authors. Next week you'll have 10 emails. Caroline, I have this wonderful new vampire book. I would love to mention to your newsletter.
Good, go ahead.
All right, we warn you. All right, just a couple more final questions here. You already mentioned that you think it's more adult readers than teen readers possibly, but I'm curious if you have noticed or have any insight into whether teen readers are KU subscribers, because it actually seems like that'd be a great thing for parents who have teenagers that like to read to get them a subscription. But yeah. I don't know if that's actually true and helpful in the YA genre.
Yeah, I don't know, but because obviously we only see the reads we get, and you don't hear from those people that you're almost like there must be, and it must be because it's so, like you say, it's like a really good way for people that age who love reading to read cheaply. I think there must be a lot of teenagers out there, and probably they just aren't the sort of the kind of age that they're going to reach out and be like, hey, they're just going to be reading the books, enjoying them.
Yeah, I feel
But
like
I
they're
don't have any insight.
right. Like they may be more likely to talk about you on social media than email you. But I don't know. I get emails kind of that run the gamut, and it's funny to me because the people who identify themselves by their age, they're always really young, or they're like seniors and retired, and they want to say like, "I've been reading sci-fi for 50."
Yeah.
But like the middle, you don't really. They never say like, "This is my age." So I don't know. Sometimes it is hard to tell unless they actually email you.
Yeah, I had my local newspaper did a little story on me, and one of the things that they sort of took out of what I said to them was that I was like, oh, my readership is like 20 to 60 plus. And so many, when I posted it on my Facebook, so many of my fans were like, oh, thank God I'm not the only like 51-year-old reading this genre. I felt like so alone. And I was like, no, like literally so many people with just so many different ages. And yeah, I don't think there doesn't need to be an age on it.
It is funny how the people in their emails who define how old they are almost always they're proud at how young they are and are still reading books, and they're proud at how old they are and are still reading books.
Yeah, definitely.
Just one quick question. What are your thoughts on audiobooks? Have you put any thought into them?
I have, but I haven't done one. My problem is, and you guys might know more about this than I do, but I have multiple points of view in my books. So I've kind of held off doing it because if one person reads it, I don't know if it would be right, if it would work. I know on ACX they only seem to have, you can only have like one author at a time, not author, narrator at a time reading it. So for me, I'm kind of like, if I wanted to do it, I would want to do it with those multiple point of views, and I'm sure people can do that. I just don't know how.
Right. Yeah, they exist. I mean, there's like 3 different levels of audiobooks. Like there's the multi-narrator and full dramatic performance aside from just a single narrator. All I can say from my own experience is it's remarkable how some of these narrators, some of the vocal range on these narrators can impress you. Although
Oh,
all things
really?
being equal, yeah, I mean when I did ACX auditions, there was some narration where I'm like, that's one person, that's crazy. But all things being equal, my observation has been if you're doubtful, then usually a female narrator that does a more convincing male voice than a male narrator doing female voices. It can get a little weird sometimes the other way around.
Yeah, I can imagine actually. Yeah, because I think because mine are first person as well. Obviously, it's really them. So that was if like my first series is third person, sorry. So that would be okay because they're just reading the story. But when it's their first person, you're kind of like it's got to be them, their voice. So that's kind of what's held me off a little bit. I don't know.
Okay, so have you given any thought to print editions for your books?
Yeah, so I've done it through Amazon's. I had it on Create Space, and then Amazon have their whole new program now. I don't honestly sell that many print books. My fans tend to buy them to be like, "Yay, have a copy," and it's really lovely. But that's not where I get a lot of my sales. Honestly, I don't know how. I just think it's just on it. Most of my because I'm exclusive with Amazon. Most of my money really comes through the reads. So I wouldn't know how I would boost sales through paperbacks.
Well, what we can tell you was actually worked well for us is if you have it enabled, turn off the expanded distribution for us anyways, because that will allow you to drop the price of your books by easily a couple of bucks, and you can still make a profit off the things there. So with us here in America, it's like almost like a mind game. If you can drop it below $10, people are more inclined to buy it. So we had one of our guests interviewers that was telling us that that's the first thing he did was drop that, because you ask yourself how much do you actually make or how many sales do you make on that expanded distribution. And for my answer was not much. So I dropped it personally, and my print copies sales increased by 30-40%. So
Oh
it was
wow,
pretty
yeah.
good.
I'll have to definitely check that out.
Yeah, I just talked about it last week, so people know, and you probably already heard it too, but I tentatively am having good experience so far with doing what Jeff just said, dropping it in Create Space and then doing Ingram Spark for also with like a 40% discount. I think I could get the books down to about $8.99 for like 90,000 words. And I'm actually getting quite a few orders. So I will probably
See,
do
it
that.
works.
Yeah, going forward. I'm sure there may be libraries or bookstores that if your book's selling well on Amazon, people are scoping out those top 100 lists. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think obviously the price point is such an issue because it's so high that it does put people off, especially for something that maybe they haven't heard of. It's taking a bit more of a risk, and then we're only getting a little bit of a percentage of that anyway, so it's a difficult one. But yeah, if you can drop that price point, that would be really good.
All right, well, that's it for our questions. So it sounds like you're working on book 3. Do you want to plug anything and let people know where they can find you online?
Yeah, well, so you can find me on Facebook at Caroline Peckham, and the book 3 is going through editing now. It's a trilogy, so it's going to be done, and then there'll be other books in this world, spin-off characters and that kind of thing. So that'll be what I'm working on next. So yeah, come check it out, and that'll be great.
All right, and what was the name of the first one? It was just V Games?
V Games, yeah, the Vampire Games trilogy.
All right, sounds good. You know, if they keep selling well, you're going to have to like write 10. Not just a trilogy. I always start with a trilogy and then it turns into more.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming on the show and answering our questions today. And I'm not going to say quintessential again.
Quintessential.
No more words more than 2 syllables in the introductions. New rule. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's nice to meet you, Carolyn. Thanks for all the info.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone. And this is episode 172. If you want to come and get Carolyn's links, they'll be up on our site at marketingsff.com.
So long, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.